Because sine is an odd function, when you have that negative value for b, your graph is reflected across the x-axis. Cosine stays the same. Let's transform even more. Here is an example where sine has a b value of 1/2, and when we take 2 pi divided by 1/2, we're actually multiplying by the reciprocal of 1/2. That becomes 2 pi times 2, or 4 pi. So when you have a b value that's a fraction, you're actually making your period longer. When you have a b value that is larger, you're making your period shorter. So when I had the graph of sine of 2x, the period became 2 pi over 2, or just pi. So notice it did one full cycle in pi rather than 2 pi as normal. Let's transform using horizontal and vertical shifts. When you are translating inside a function, that's moving the graph right and left. When you are translating outside of the function, you're moving the graph up and down. You can write y equals a f of x minus h plus k, where h is the horizontal translation and k is the vertical translation. In this case, we're going to use c and d. We're sticking with the letters a, b, c, and d for these. C has a minus sign in front of it, and D has a plus sign in front of it. So it's important that you pay attention to those signs. Standard is to have a minus with the x. If it's a positive, then that means your C value is actually negative. So you're doing the opposite direction based on the sign, so it's important that you pay attention to that. For C greater than 0, we are shifting to the right. C less than 0, we're shifting to the left. For d greater than 0, you're shifting up, and for d less than 0, you're shifting down. And this is just y equals f of x minus c is just showing you notation of for any function x minus c. Same thing for y equals f of x plus d. For any function plus d, that's a translation up. There are specific properties of general sine and cosine functions. We've talked about the period, we've talked about the amplitude. We can do what's called a phase shift. When you have the graph translated, that is called a phase shift. We can calculate the phase shift by taking the value of c divided by b. That's going to move our graph left or right. Useful information here on the sine and cosine functions that help us create graphs for these. Our amplitude is the absolute value of a. The period is found by taking 2 pi over the b value, which is the value next to x. The phase shift is found by taking c over b. The vertical shift is given by d. And then one full cycle is given on the interval between 0 and 2 pi, remember, because normally we have a period of 0 to 2 pi. We then adjust that based on the period and whatever phase shift we need to make. The domain is all real numbers, and then the range is that amplitude plus whatever the vertical shift is. That's all we have for this section. Head over to the skill practice to see how to graph using amplitude, period, phase shift, vertical shift, and your domain and range.